Welcome all. Sean Manaea back to Queens, 3-year, $75 million contract. Are we happy with that move? Do the Mets, are we going to continue to improve our rotation, or is that our biggest piece that we will add? Well, Pete Alonso, things aren't looking really great for the Polar Bear in terms of getting that monster contract. But if you're a New York Mets fan, Pete Alonso coming back to Queens looks very likely. We're going to go over the reasons why and what are the New York Mets' next moves. Some people are saying Mets need a better DH. Apparently, the Mets were in on Jock Peterson. They struck out. So the Mets know that they need to improve on many various positions. Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso. You know what? That has been a rumor that has been bandied about the last couple of days. We are going to address that as well. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting rumors about our New York Mets. But I got to start off with this. I really got to start off, you know, giving respect to David Stearns. David Stearns played out the Sean Manaea market perfectly. Perfectly. Sean Manaea and his agent wanted more money and more years. This was the deal that I gotta say, this was the perfect deal that Sean Manaea deserved. Deserved. There was a great pitching market as at the opening of free agency, and I'll tell you this. I always say, the market develops, market changes as free agency, goes on, but sometimes a market will never develop. Case in point, Pete Alonso. It looks like he's a guy, a very special circumstance, potential, all-star player. He's been an all-star 4 times in his career, but it looks like he's in a situation where his market will never develop. There are many various reasons for that, but Sean Manaea, 3 years, $75 million, was the contract that I predicted 3 months ago. 3 months ago, I said the number where I want to be, I don't want to go. In fact, at that time, I thought it was too high. I'm like, I know it sounds high, but I think this is where we need to be. At the beginning of the offseason, when Severino got 3 years and $67 million, and then you heard the Oakland Athletics actually offered Sean Manaea a larger contract, but he rejected it. I'm like, oh no, what are we in for? 4 years, $110 million. It seems like that's where the market was going. But lo and behold, and this is where supply and demand comes into play. There were many teams in the beginning of free agency searching for that pitcher, but prices were high. Prices were high, and teams looked elsewhere. They looked through the trade market. I think one of the last teams in on Sean Manaea were the Phillies. As we know, the Phillies traded for Luzardo. That took them out of the Manaea sweepstakes. Now, Manaea and his agent were like, oh my God, like 6, 7 teams that were in on me are out. They got a starting pitcher. Plus, the market became flooded. And this is what I noticed throughout the course of free agency. Now Luis Castillo's available. Now Dylan Cease may be available. Now Framber Valdez is available. Now some of the Pittsburgh Pirates pitchers are available. Jesus Luzardo, he just went out. Now you hear, potential Minnesota Twins pitchers could be available. So as free agency went along, now these teams have an option to trade away, a lot of times people hold prospects near and dear, but for those teams that don't have the money, now instead of them collecting every last penny, they're like, okay, let's go trade for a Luzardo. Let's go trade potentially in the future for a Castillo. Now the risk aspect comes in the face of Manaea. Like, okay, now if the Mets pivot and get a Castillo or pivot and go elsewhere, that 3-year, $75 million contract or that 4-year, close to $100 million contract is off the table. At the end of the day, the Mets knew Manaea, knew Alonso, wanted them. That was a huge advantage. Any contract that Pete Alonso potentially got, and maybe in the case of Manaea, they were going back to the Mets in terms of, hey, could you match this? Hey, could you beat this? And you know how good that looks, folks? It looks super good. There were so many thoughts that came through my head, when I saw this contract. The first thing was, oh my God, we got him back at 3 years. That was freaking phenomenal. We'll have him for his age 33-year-old season, his age 34, and age 35. I swear it was going to be a 4 or 5 year deal based on the way things were going. But like I said, market conditions change, and the Mets were able to capitalize. Other teams that Oakland A's, they jumped at Luis Severino. Other teams made these moves, and then they took themselves out of potentially getting Sean Manaea at a reasonable price. Mets always were there; they were always there, and I like the fact, like I mentioned before, Sean Manaea wanted the Mets. And it really made sense, and it really looks good for the Mets in so many different ways. You're going after a guy like Roki Sasaki. Now you see a guy like Sean Manaea, who is there for 1 year, but he wanted the Mets so bad. I think Sean Manaea certainly could have got more money elsewhere. Certainly. Yes, the market changed, but certainly he could have got more than 3 years, $75 million. But he wanted the Mets so bad. Why? Why? Well, Sean Manaea was the poster child for this pitching lab, the poster child for let's say, the success of this pitching lab. People don't even realize how good Sean Manaea was. Diehard Met fans know, but baseball fans don't know. Baseball fans don't know how good Sean Manaea is, and how many things this man has changed. Let me just give you an example. Do we know that he changed his arm angle? That was certainly notated by broadcasters. It was certainly notated by everybody. And his pitches became very, very nasty. But he also changed a huge his repertoire. He changed it in a tremendous way. In 2023, predominantly, he was a four-seam fastball pitcher. He threw that pitch 56% of the 56% of the time. 56% in 2023, he threw that four-seam fastball. Do you know what percentage he threw the four-seam in 2024? He scrapped that pitch. He scrapped it. His best pitch, or his pitch that he went to the most, he only threw that 11% in 2024. 11%. So he went from 56 to 11%. Well, what other pitch took his place as the lead pitch? The sinker. The sinker. In 2023, he threw that sinker .08. Less than 1% of the time he threw his sinker. In 2024, after the pitching lab and all the mechanics adjustment, he threw that sinker 43% of the time, and that became his predominant pitch. Sean Manaea last year was an ace down the stretch. Whether you want to consider him an ace or not, he in 32 games pitched, he gave up 3 runs or less in 26 games. 26 games. He was super, super reliable. And like I said, after June, July, that's when he turned it on. This guy mechanically has been getting better and better. I mean, I love this deal. Represents so many different positives. It represents the success of the pitching lab. It represents that players want to be here and enjoy being here. It represents that we were able to retain our ace, and he's going to get better, in my opinion. He's going to continue to work on himself and get better. I really love this. And, the biggest thing I love of all is his leadership on the field and off the field. Sean Manaea said it in free agency. He said it, guys, whatever. He was talking to teams. He's a leader on the field and off the field. Great clubhouse guy. All right, folks. I just want to stop real quick, and as you could see, I got a different background. I am in a different location, so if things sound differently, look differently, I apologize. It is the holiday season, holiday time. I do have family over. My brother-in-law's over. He is a Yankee fan, but I think he's being converted to a Met fan. I'm not quite sure about that, but that's a story for another day. But I do have the Christmas tree, and I have my Mets, some merchandise over here. So, try to keep things a little similar. Didn't want to put a hole in the wall and put a picture up, but, it's going to be a quick little setup. So that's where why that change has happened. Hope we are all enjoying our holidays. Most importantly, I thank you as always. Okay, so we got Sean Manaea back in the fold. It's looking like our rotation is going to go a little like this: Manaea, Sanga, Frankie Montaz, Holmes, and Peterson. That's what it's looking like. If we have a 5-man, go to a 5-man. That's what it's looking like. It's probably going to be. Obviously we have more guys. We have Blackburn, we have Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, guys I'm not saying, great, put in there, but, guys who can eat up innings, guys who can come out of the pen, and guys that, you have them another year in the lab, like Tyler McGill, a guy who has tools, physical gifts, it's just that sometimes it's between the ears. And as you can see in the case of Sean Manaea, you tweak his mechanics, you tweak his repertoire, you play around with his pitches, and the guy does have that type of potential to become a success. And again, Roki Sasaki's looking. And I think the Sean Manaea case speaks to what this organization is doing right. And it really speaks to why other guys from organizations or other guys from other teams would want to come and play here. Now, are we done? Are we done? Does that sound like a World Series rotation to you? Let's be honest. I think that um, David Stearns is going to be, very pragmatic. We know he's a value guy. You don't sign Manaea if he's going to want 5 years and he's going to want $30 million. That's not that's not going to be a winning formula for the Mets. But so it's not there. You never panic. You never act like a desperate, move. You don't give a guy 8-9 years when he's 31 years old. Case in point, Max Fried. Those are moves that are going to prohibit you from making better moves in the future. Now, if every move is gives you that type of flexibility, that allows you to be a better team. If a move is not available on December 1st, you wait to December 22nd, December 23rd. If that next move is not available, let's say, you want an extra bat or you want that next arm, you want that next Luis Castillo move. The Luis Castillo situation has been changed too. The teams that were involved in the Luis Castillo sweepstakes, like the Mets and other teams, have communicated that the price is too high and that they are currently out of the Luis Castillo sweepstakes. So does that mean the Mariners are going to hold on to Luis? Yes, they have that choice. But if they want to get the money, if they want a team to swallow that $23 million deal, then they're going to have to accept less. Then maybe if they accept less in a month or two, maybe the Mets are back in. Also, Roki Sasaki, that is another option, and I think these moves look good for getting Roki Sasaki. But what I'm trying to say is the Mets are nowhere near from done. Even opening day, and I keep repeating this, I got a lot of predictions right. One of the things I said, and I said this in the beginning of last year, the opening day roster will not be the roster in July. It will not be your roster at the end of the season. David Stearns is like a baseball fantasy GM. He's going to constantly try to upgrade the team incrementally. Has he made that signature move? No, he's not. No, he hasn't made that signature move. And then also, don't forget about guys like Sprout. Don't forget about guys in the minor leagues like Blade Tidwell. I think we have an opportunity to see those guys. So that's why Stearns is really not operating out of position of desperation. You always got a guy like Jose Budo. I personally like to keep him in the bullpen, but he's also a guy who can be used as a starter. But at the end of the day, philosophy David Stearns has: don't act desperate. You make mistakes when you act desperate. Okay. Now, center field. Who's our opening day center fielder? I mean, there are defensive and I'll say this, offensive moves that I think are going to happen. We're certainly going to, in my opinion, see a reunion with Pete Alonso. The DH, I mentioned at the top that we were in on Jock Peterson. Does that mean we're going to pivot to Jesse Winker? Does that mean that we're going to see a Bregman pickup and possibly have Vientos as a DH? Does that mean that there's a trade out there that we're not familiar with that, Stearns could be exploring? At the end of the day, I think that Stearns is going to battle and he's going to ultimately win. And if there's any situation where he thinks the other team has the upper hand, we are done. We are done. We will visit this another day. And that's the one thing I like about, not the one thing, one of the many things I like about Stearns. He is very, very shrewd. He's a very shrewd and calculated businessman. And despite him having that small market mentality or moniker attached to his name, he can operate he can operate with the big boys. Sean Manaea, $25 million a year. He's going to be the ninth highest paid pitcher in all of baseball. And, rightfully so. I mean, people, and I hear that, some of I hear a lot of people, I would say probably 70% of Mets fans are happy because they know Sean Manaea can be a successful pitcher in New York. But the feedback that I've heard is, oh, he's not an ace. He's not an ace. Well, how many aces are there? How many aces are there? I mean, Sean Manaea's stats last year were, in my opinion, really phenomenal. I mean, he ended up with a 3.47 ERA, but if you take out like literally the first or second month, I mean, his ERA is below 3. 32 starts, 184 innings. I'm sorry, 181 innings, 184 strikeouts, 1.08 WHIP. I mean, the guy was as solid as you can be. I mean, he definitely was our ace down the stretch, our ace in the playoffs. And he had some killer games in September. Killer games in September. I know that game against the Brewers, he didn't look so well, but at that point, I think he was a little bit gassed. He was a little bit gassed. And that's why I think the Mets are going for extra depth this year in the starting rotation. But I think we are far from done. Walker Buehler also signed with the Boston Red Sox, 1 year, $22 million contract. I think, Sean Manaea, my opinion, best pitcher we signed by far, and one of the best pitchers signed over the offseason. I mean, pitchers signed, I mean, you want to make an argument for Blake Snell. I mean, Blake Snell, he's a guy who only pitches on a very limited basis. He doesn't have as good as control. And I think his trajectory is a little shaky based on the fact that he's not healthy. Like, really, honestly, would you rather want Sean Manaea for 3 years, $75 million, or Blake Snell for that contract that he signed? I mean, I take Sean Manaea every day. Every day, they're virtually the same age. So, you just give all the credit in the world to Mr. David Stearns. Now, as we advance, as we talk about Pete Alonso, and it's kind of a sad situation with Pete Alonso. Kind of a sad situation. Pete Alonso's market has never developed. The thought process with Pete, Scott Boras, and company was that as soon as Juan Soto was signed, Juan Soto signs, all of the teams that didn't get Juan Soto, Toronto, Boston, Yankees, especially the Yankees, the thought process was that those teams would pivot and they would be able to offer that large amount of money left over from the Juan Soto sweepstakes, and they would push it on to Pete Alonso. And that's what happens sometimes. That's what happens. Sometimes there's a consolation prize. And you see it. You see these guys get these mega contracts for the losers of these mega sweepstakes, but not in this situation. And I think Juan Soto was just such a generational player and so much heads and shoulders above the next level of talent that it just was so apparent. Why am I going to, if I miss out on Juan Soto, like supposedly the next Ted Williams, why would I give $200 million to a one-dimensional first baseman? Despite him having, pretty good positive slugger, 43 home runs average over the last 6 years, but he could be considered on the decline, depending on who you speak to. And I killed Pete. All throughout the year. And maybe I was a little bit too hard on him, but the reason why I was hard on him was for one reason. One reason. I thought he was a bit greedy. Because the Mets offered him a very fair deal, and all you got to do is look back to the Freddie Freeman contract, look back to the Matt Olson contract, and the Mets basically made him an offer to be a lifetime Met, and then Pete Alonso basically said, no, 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 no. Not only am I not going to accept that offer, I'm going to get another agent, And I'm looking for, he was looking to be paid like a superstar, a mega superstar. And last year, when he had the chance to put up or shut up, I mean, he wilted. He wilted. So that's why, even though you could say he had a respectable year, you could say it was just 1 year down, he was supposed to speak and speak loudly to everybody. And, by him not doing that, and everybody knew which was at stake, everybody knew the gauntlet that Pete Alonso laid down. And for him to have his worst year, it scared the crap out of MLB. Now, Pete Alonso finds himself in a situation where, I believe in the beginning of this offseason, there was money there too. The Houston Astros offered Bregman $160 million or $156 million. We know they were looking for a first baseman. They've pivoted to Christian Walker. They offered him 3 years, $60 million. But if Pete Alonso, in the beginning of the offseason, when there were 10 teams virtually looking for a first baseman, if he says, yeah, I'll take 6 years, $150 million, or 5 years around there, I think he would have had like 5 or 6 teams genuinely interested. But he told everybody, and this is where Scott Boras was an idiot, told everybody, no, Polar Bears, 8 years, $200 million. Basically forced every team that might have been interested to look elsewhere. Now your client, Pete Alonso, is looking at one damn team, and Pete Alonso may be looking at a situation where he's got to sign a 3 or 4 year contract of less than $100 million. Very sad. And Pete, honestly, I think deserved more than that. And would have been paid more than that if his agent did not play this out so poorly. So do I put the blame on Pete? I put some of the blame on Pete, but Pete this is not what he does. He goes on the field. He's a baseball player. He's not an agent. He doesn't play the market. He doesn't know the market. And I think Pete Alonso is going to be this year's casualty, like Bellinger last year, Snell last year, Montgomery. Those were the casualties from last year. And of course, Matt Chapman. Chapman and Snell, yes, they were able to have those 1 year prove it deal. But do you know how risky a 1 year prove it deal would be? There's no way Pete Alonso signs a 1 year prove it deal. What the best thing he could do is sign a 3-4 year deal with a couple opt-outs, maybe an opt-out after a year 1 and year 2, because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have that one opt-out, and then maybe you have that mega year next year, and then now you're stuck in a mediocre contract, and you only have 2 or 3 years left on your contract. So give him multiple opportunities to opt out. If he opts out next year, it helps the Mets. And even if he doesn't opt out in this particular situation, if the Mets offer him a 3 or 4 year contract, even if there has multiple opt-outs, even if Pete decides to stay after year 1, you go into the year 2 of the contract, Pete has 2 or 3 years left of that contract, you sign Guerrero, and then you could put Pete Alonso at DH, and he'll be a DH for 2 or 3 years. Nothing crazy. The Mets, by being shrewd, by being very calculated, are putting themselves in a position to get future free agents or future big-time players. If they don't get a Guerrero next year, I'm not sure if they'd be in the Kyle Tucker market, but, then they have that Japanese first base, I forget his, I always butcher his name, but, there's a great Japanese, another sensational first baseman. I can't believe I forgot the kid's name, but he's a first baseman. So you put yourself in a situation where you can either go after Guerrero or you could go after the kid from Japan, and Pete slides over. He slides over. But you can only do that if you offer him a contract that's short term, or obviously you give him the opportunity to opt out. David Stearns, I think, finds himself in a situation where Pete is a fan favorite, but it doesn't matter if Pete's a fan favorite. He was not willing to overpay. Give him credit. Give him credit. By playing poker, it seems like Pete Alonso is going to lose. All of the teams that were interested in a first baseman exercised options elsewhere. And that's all because Boras priced out every single damn team. Any other team right now that is semi-interested in Pete is a small market team. The Mets are still the biggest market team. And also, I'll tell you another thing. I'll tell you another thing that's the presence of Steve Cohen does. Steve Cohen is extremely intimidating. Intimidating. Maybe the Yankees can compete with Cohen, maybe the Dodgers, but that's about it. That's about it. If any other team knows that the Mets are interested, they don't want to go through the embarrassment. You think it felt good for the Yankees to lose to the New York Mets? It didn't feel good. If the Mets, if another team knows that the Mets are interested, um, and they knew that the Mets were highly interested in Alonso, it's not even worth to go through a bidding war with Steve Cohen. But that's just a hypothetical situation. I think the realistic situation is Stearns waiting out the market and the interested teams filling their needs elsewhere. And at the end of the day, Pete Alonso is left in a dark room thinking, I should be paid much, much more money. And, I could do these opt outs, but there's no guarantee. Michael Conforto, a couple years ago, he was screwed. He got injured. He was offered that big long term contract and he didn't sign. I mean, not, you hear all these times, all these players who, bet on themselves and come through, but there's also those stories about players who bet on themselves and lose and lose. Pete Alonso may be one of the latest guys to lose. All right, folks. So what is next? What is next? I said right before the Griffin Canning signing that the Mets would sign two more starting pitchers and then go after Roki Sasaki. That's what I said. So they signed Griffin Canning, they signed obviously Sean Manea, and they're still going after Roki Sasaki. I still believe, even though I said that they're only going after two and a Roki, if there's an opportunity to better yourself and possibly give up a Brett Beatty, you know, a Brett Beatty, Jesus Baez, a package like that doesn't involve your Jet Williams, maybe your Drew Gilberts, those maybe you want to save for another package. I think that's when the Mets would be more interested. That's when they say, okay, let's get back to the table. You want Brett Beatty, and then also too, you sign a Roki Sasaki. Let's say you sign a Roki Sasaki. Now the Mets have an excess of pitching. You got 3-4 lefties, maybe David Peterson and a Brett Beatty. Maybe that would interest the team to bring something back. David Peterson's not making a lot of money. Maybe you swap him out for Luis Castillo. It just gives you so much flexibility. The way Stearns is playing this, it gives you so much flexibility, and I think it also looks good for impending players like Roki Sasaki, for guys to want to come back. I mentioned Sean and I wanting to come back. Pete Alonso wants to come back. I mean, everybody who played on the New York Mets last year wanted to come back. Severino left because of money. The Mets weren't paying him that much. And then also, I hear a lot of things, and I'm not really sure. I think this is a very small minority about. I was saying a week ago about the Mets having a very similar team to last year. But, I think the Mets team right now is hands down better than last year, even without Alonso, because you virtually have Juan Soto replacing Alonso. So, on the offensive end, it is certainly, I would say, better. And then on the pitching end right now, you have Sean Manaea, your ace back. You have Montaz replacing Severino. You have Holmes placing Quintana. And you can argue Quintana and Severino, you'd rather have a Holmes and a Montaz. Another year older from Quintana, he would be 36. And then also Severino, even though he had a decent year, it was close to a 4 ERA. And having Severino healthy 2 years in a row is a very big ask. So I would say the secondary pitchers are better. And then, of course, you have your David Peterson, your Tyler McGill. And then at the end of the day, folks, remember, you're going to have Senga for, God willing, more than 5 innings. So you got to say the pitching staff currently, as we speak, is better than the pitching staff of last year. Senga, Manaea at the top. And the reason why I'd like to still pursue a Castillo, I'm not putting all my eggs in the Sasaki basket. You pursue a Castillo just because you want guys that you can rely on. Senga, I can't rely on a guy who only pitched 5 innings. And even if he does pitch this year and he's healthy, he's going to be on an innings limit. He's going to be on an innings limit. And all our other guys, Tyler McGill hasn't pitched a lot in his career. Peterson hasn't pitched a lot. So, I mean, the guys who in this lineup, Holmes is a new pitcher. You basically have Manea and you basically have Montas who have pitched last year 150 innings or more. So there's going to be a lot of innings that need to be eaten up. That's why I think we're still going to be searching for that. We're going to be searching for that extra pitcher. Now, the DH is out there. Peterson. I mean, I really wanted Peterson in the worst way. We're gonna see if they pivot to a guy like Jesse Winker, but I never saw them being satisfied with Winker having that full-time job. He was just exclusively a guy who got pinch hits and also just batted against righties. So that's why, like the Alec Bregman, going back to that, I think it's got some legs. I really do. It was big over the weekend. That was very popular, but that's why I think that made sense because if you're going to boost your lineup, why not? Mark Vientos potentially be DH, Pete Alonso at first base. I mean, you can always switch things around, but I think the Mets are going all in with offense, and that's what them being interested in Bregman and being interested in Alonso. That's what that tells me. Pitching we can develop, offense will pay for, and we're gonna have an elite lineup that makes the other pitcher work. Bregman, that's what he does. He makes the other pitcher work. He's more of a line drive hitter. Yes, he's had some statistics go down, but it is what it is. So let's end it off here. I just want to say one more thing about Alonso. It was believed that Alonso last year swung at a lot of pitches outside the zone. A lot of pitchers 2 feet outside the zone, he struck out. He struck out on, or he swung at. But in terms of his overall swinging at pitches outside of the zone, this was actually his most disciplined year in terms of that specific stat. Yeah, I looked at it. I think only 24% of the time he chased on pitches outside of the zone. He's, not that that's a low number, but it's his lowest number in his career. So sometimes, if you look at a specific game or specific moments, I mean, maybe he failed in those moments when runners were in scoring position, which we know we have stats that can back that up. So those particular swings and misses stand out more. But in terms of an overall season, he was his lowest and most disciplined. But we know with runners in scoring position, he was the least disciplined. So, if you go by that perspective and judging, he did horrible in 2024. So we'll end it off there. And that was a kind of a negative Pete Alonso note. But our next video hopefully will be a coming together of Pete Alonso and the New York Mets. And you see how these players are wanting to sign before the Christmas holiday. Usually there's a lull. Usually, sometimes executives go away. Not in recent past, it hasn't really been like that. But, there'll be some agents, there'll be some players who want to go away with family, and they don't want to deal with potentially having the pressure of, let's say, a Pete Alonso. What if the Mets back out or the Mets get somebody else? Then you got to worry about losing $100 million. I mean, that's scary. Sean Manaea, take the $75 million. Take the $75 million. You don't want to wake up to the Mets trading for Luis Castillo and them being out of the running. You saw what the Phillies did, and that probably scared the hell out of him, and that urged him to sign the deal. I would say the same thing, advice to Pete. Pete, don't wait on what might happen. I would say capitalize right now on what you can take advantage of. Have that opt out after the first year. You go out there, you have a monster season, and then the money will be there next year. All right. Thank you all. Have a great day. And also thank you to the new members who subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the new memberships. That means a lot. Have a great day, everyone.